What many of you don't know is that the story we're going to tell you today, I'll start with a bleep. What many of you don't know is that the story we're going to tell you today was actually born here in GibTalks in 2018. After many years, Mark and I reconnected here in the green room next door. We got chatty, and I said I wanted to travel to Nepal. And this seems to have struck the right chord with him. My plan was simple. I wanted to backpack the country and record that all with my camera. I was quite happy to do some trekking. The classic Everest base camp trek, a 12-day, 130-kilometer round trip, suited me just fine. But as planning progressed, I began to realize that Mark had other plans and wanted to do a longer trek. Don't ask me how, let's call it a moment of weakness, but somehow I got absorbed by his energy, his enthusiasm, and his sense of adventure.
Well, I was so excited that for the first time I was going on an adventure with a friend from Gibraltar, my friend Stephen. I was as happy as a pig in swill. I was going to go and visit the Himalayas, something I always wanted to do. And after some research, I came up with what is known as the 3 Parcels trek, arguably the most complete trek in Nepal, covering most of the Everest region and including Everest Base Camp, which after all is what Stephen wanted to do.
Yeah.
Now, this consists of a circular route of 275 kilometers, walking for 25 days and traversing 3 high passes at above 5,000 meters, mostly walking above the 4,000 meter contour line. It is rated as an extremely difficult trek. Don't ask me how, but somehow Stephen agreed to it.
After a week in Kathmandu, I was all buzz, making pictures of people and life there. But Mark is definitely not a city animal. He was getting bored and was desperate to get started. So we took a 10-hour 4x4 drive as far as the road would take us, if you want to call that a road, and it got us to Himalaya, a village at the foot of the lower Himalayas. And from there, we commenced our trek. Now, in the Himalayas, the rivers flow from north to south. But we're crossing the lower Himalayas from west to east. So this naturally means that we're facing an unrelenting terrain of brutal climbs and hellish descents. On the 3rd day, we climbed the Majula Pass, a baby pass at 3,600 meters. I say baby, not to sound too cocky, but it is still higher than any other peak in the Iberian Peninsula, or the British Isles for that matter. Over the next few days, the trek got harder and tougher, and I developed a bad knee, which dented my confidence and slowed me down. I was also worried that with every step I took, I risked twisting an ankle, and that would have ended my trek.
Stephen is a gutsy fellow. He took some painkillers and cracked on. Now, we had gone over the range of complications we could encounter on a trek such like this one: knees, ankles, lower back. But at the top of a list was altitude sickness. Peck, our guide, tells us that to avoid mountain sickness, we have to eat well, drink lots of water, and sleep properly. That there are many cases of altitude sickness in the area, but not everyone gets it. Now, Tech insists that we drink lots of lemon ginger tea, and that we eat dalbat, the power food of the Sherpa, which is a mixture of steamed rice with lentil soup.
It takes 7 days of agony, sore knees, and yes, you guessed it, gallons of ginger tea. Namche is a choke point for trekkers, most of whom have only started 2 days earlier from Lukla. And from here, 90% of them are on the most direct and popular route to the Everest base camp. But thanks to Mark's canning plan, we're nowhere near that easy or direct route. We're taking the long way round.
But I've got to tell you at this stage, it's important you understand that Stephen's total experience in walking had been 3 days, 3 weeks before in Spain, in Sierra Nevada. And there he was now, trekking along the roof of the world. That night I do not sleep well. And at breakfast, Stephen has a stinging headache. He has lost his appetite. And believe you me, that was really surprising for a guy who used to eat every single scoop of rice from his dalbat on every occasion. Now, difficulty in sleeping Headaches and loss of appetite are symptoms of acute mountain sickness, and we were already showing signs of this. Other symptoms to look out for are dizziness, fatigue, nausea, rapid pulse rate, and shortness of breath.
The following day, we commenced our assault towards our first high pass. After hours of hard walking, to my front appears this monster wall of rock. And I remember I look up and I ask myself, how the hell are we actually going to get up there? But we do. It takes over 3 hours of climbing, of hard work and heavy breathing to get where that bare rock meets that blue skies. At the summit, we stand at the narrow edge of the Majula Pass, 5,450 meters. And oh my God, what a view! What a view! This view will remain with me for the rest of my life.
Well, our program says that day 12 is a rest day, but Tech has other ideas. We ascend Gokyo-ri, a high peak above the lake, and get up to 5,350 meters. Now, going up, we suffer from the altitude and have difficulty breathing, because up there is only 50% of the oxygen compared to the air at sea level. So the lungs and heart are overworked and our overall condition deteriorating. The views from the top are inspiring. There are only 14 mountains in the world higher than 8,000 meters. And to our front, we could see 4 of them: Shouju, Makalu, Lhotse, and the king of them all, Everest.
It is 5 a.m. and it is still dark. And we start our ascent towards our second high pass, the Majula Pass. The only light that we have is that from our head torches. It is so cold that my feet and hands are freezing. I'm wearing gloves and I still don't even dare to get my camera out. We scramble over little rocks, big rocks, and boulders the size of cars. It is tiring, it is exhausting, and it takes forever. When we get to the top, we find that on the other side we are faced with a very steep and dangerous descent, followed by a hike of about 1 kilometer over ice. But we're not kitted out for that, so not surprisingly we take a few painful tumbles. So now we're 2 down and 1 more to go.
Following another sleepless night for me, I am not breathing well and have nothing left in the gas tank. My body is telling me to stop, but I ignore it. We walk on an easy path at 4,500 meters, but my legs refuse to move. My boots feel like blocks of concrete, really, really heavy. I drag my feet along the path of less resistance. Feeling terribly sick, somehow, I get to the next destination, La Bouche. Now, the next day, we're really happy and very excited to get to Everest base camp. There are no tents or climbers, just eyes on rocks at this time of the year. To our front is the notorious Khumbu Icefall. Towering above all is the mighty summit of Everest, a staggering 8,848 meters, the highest mountain on Earth. It is already mid-afternoon, but we decide to attempt to go up Kalapata, another mountain.
On the way up, I stop at the most impressive views of Everest. I set up my camera, but it is late, it is getting dark, and it is getting cold. We're only 45 minutes from the top, but when I look down the mountain, I see that Mark is in a poor state. I wait for him to catch up, and I suggest that in view of the time, we should descend. To my big surprise, and I must insist it was a big surprise, he agrees, no questions asked. So he goes down with Tech, but I stay behind to take that shot. Mark has another sleepless night, shivering and shaking. That morning he complains he has a really bad headache, and I suggest that he should stay in the safety and warmth of the tea house. But those of you who know this man know that he's a stubborn man. I'm sure Michelle, who's in the audience somewhere, there's Michelle, I'm sure she will agree with me with that. He follows me, or he ignores my advice, follows me up to Kalapata for a second time. 5,643 meters. We reach the highest point of our trek.
The next morning, I struggle out of bed and we leave Gorak Shep. I am lagging behind from the very beginning, bleeding from the nose, keeping this a secret from Stephen and from Tech, our guide. I tell them to go on, that I am just a little tired and I will get there. At the next tea house, I collapse in bed They bring me food, blankets, and I cannot bring myself to eat a single bite.
Tech and I are very concerned. Tomorrow is the really big day. At an impressive 5,535 meters, on the other side of the Khumbu Glacier is the toughest of the mountain passes, the Khumbu. Tech tells us it would take about 10 hours at a normal pace to get over the glacier, over the mountain pass, and onto the next settlement. But we're worried for Mark's health, and how will he cope? So we hatch up a plan to send him back down to Nanchi Pasha with Rakesh, our porter.
That night is really bad. Stephen is snoring, the thin walls are shaking, and he's taking all the air in the room. There's nothing left for me. In the morning, I tell them that the only thing wrong with the plan is that I do not agree with it, and that I will not quit.
The trail up the Khumbu is non-existent. We tread over loose scree, patches of dirty ice, and the gradient is so steep that at times we need to use our hands. It is unrelenting, and we need to stop and rest numerous times. But Mark is in trouble again, dragging his feet as if moving through mud. Finally at the summit, exhausted and we walk under those colorful prayer flags, we celebrate our success, both of us speechless and in awe of all that the Himalayas has to offer.
We did it. We climbed over 5,300 meters on 5 separate occasions, hiking for 21 days, not showering for more than 10 days, and wearing the same pair of underpants for a week. In my case, anyway. Now, here in Gibraltar, we're used to sea level living, where the air is as sweet as honey, with about 21% oxygen. At the altitude we walked, there is less than half of that. I had been forcing myself for weeks. I had been gasping like a fish out of water. Now, as we got higher, the pressure got lower, which can cause fluid leakage in the lungs and in the brain. This condition is called edema. A bad case of pulmonary or cerebral edema can kill within 24 hours.
On the trail back, Mark is struggling, snorting blood and breathing erratically. He insists we push on, but he knows we have to soldier on. We're on a mountain and it's almost impossible to call for help. After 2 more days of trekking, we finally return to the outskirts of Nanchi Pasha. And here, Mark collapses. We carry him to a nearby medical center, and the doctor who sees him says, oh, he's just suffering from a bad chest infection, gives him some tablets and sees him off. But that night was the worst. Mark, look, doesn't sleep, can't control his cough like he's doing now, and Mark has not eaten or slept for days and was in a semi-conscious state. But we have 1 more day to go, 1 tough trek to Lukla, from where we will catch a flight back to Kathmandu. But that morning, Mark is unable to talk or to breathe properly. His eyes are closed. I look at his pee bottle, and it is as dense and pale as pear juice. We are now in a desperate situation. Enough is enough, Mark, I say. You're not walking another step. Finally, I decide to call in for the heli evacuation. But we still need to drag Mark to the helipad, through Nanchi Pasha and up to the other side of the mountain. It takes 6 hours and 2 airlifts to get him to Kathmandu and onto hospital.
For 3 nights, I am in isolation in intensive care on an IV drip, not knowing what is going on around me. On occasions, I feel a needle jab in my arm and open my eyes. There is a breathing mask on my face and I feel pain everywhere. I was diagnosed with severe dehydration, acute diarrhea, bacteria in the blood, the Khumbu cough, influenza A, high fever, and edema in both the brain and the lungs. The doctor said I had been suffering from high altitude sickness for more than 10 days and that I had been very lucky to have survived. Before our journey, I had told Stephen I would never give up and would drag myself up the mountain if I had to. Stephen's decision to call for the heli evacuation most likely saved my life.
When we started that adventure back in Himalaya, we saw this rock with writings. Back in Kathmandu, over the ginger tea, what else? I asked Tech about those writings. Ah, he said, looking at me with a very serious face. This is a wise Tibetan proverb, which says, you don't always need a plan. Sometimes you just need balls and a beard.